Tamron 11-20mm f2.8 is an ultra-wide fast zoom lens with autofocus for APS-C Sony E-Mount cameras. What's good guys, you're watching No Limits on channel. 11-20mm provides you with a 16.5 to 30mm full-frame equivalent focal range, and I tested this lens out a lot with Sony a6300 and even on full-frame Sony a7S III, and you definitely can use this lens with a full-frame camera even without Super35mm crop. I'll talk about it later in the video. Let's start off with the kit. In the box besides the lens itself, you'll find quite plasticky lens hood, but it's okay. Plastic front cap with squeeze release mechanism and quite a fat rear cap. The lens itself is quite small and perfectly fits APS-C cameras like Sony a6000 series and ZV-E10. The weight is only 335 grams. And it has 10 elements in 12 groups, including 2 aspherical elements and 2 low dispersion elements. The lens barrel extends as you zoom out, which can provide some dust-sucking issues and the need to balance the gimbal more accurately. And the lens aperture is a constant f2.8 throughout the whole range, and it can be closed down to f16. Speaking of gimbals, this lens doesn't have built-in image stabilization, neither does the a6300, so to work with it comfortably I suggest using a gimbal. In my case this was Zhiyun Crane M3, and the review of it is coming soon, so stay tuned. Tamron 11-20mm does have weather sealing, moisture resistance, and a rubberized gasket on the metal lens mount. This lens is made out of plastic and featured 2 rubber rings, focus and zoom, which are both pretty smooth, and I have no complaints here. The filter thread size is 67mm, which is great because it's a very common filter thread size. A lot of Tamron lenses are with 67mm thread size, and you can easily adapt bigger filters with the cheap step-up rings. Besides test shots, I took this lens to 2 actual commercial shoots, a wedding and a promo video shoot, and I was more than satisfied with the results. By the way, I have a full video comparison of iPhone 13 Pro Max versus Sony a6300, mostly using the Tamron lens. I'll leave a link down below. Tamron 11-20mm f2.8 has a completely silent RXD, Rapid Extra Silent Step-in Drive, and it's an AF motor name. The AF is doing okay on the a6300, but keep in mind that it's a pretty old camera body and it'll perform much better on the ZV-E10 for instance. On a7S III, the AF is much snappier, as you can see right here. Also, I did a ton of photos with this lens and the Sony a6300 and had no issues with autofocus whatsoever. Speaking of using this lens on a full-frame camera, with steady shot standard or off, you'll see a strong vignette at all focal length. But when you turn on the active steady shot mode with 1.1x crop and set the lens to 14mm, you get completely usable ultra-wide fast AF lens without any vignette, which is pretty cool. Or you can use this lens with a Sony a7 IV because it has Super35 Crop mode in 4K video, or while shooting 4K 60 you'll have to use the Super35 Crop, and you'll be able to get a very wide-angle AF lens shooting 4K 60 on a7 IV. And now let's have a look at sharpness, distortion and vignette at 11mm. As you can see, at 11mm the lens projects quite a strong barrel distortion and the vignette is average until f5.6. But the sharpness at 11mm is very good, starting from f2.8 even in the image corners. I'm impressed. Now let's get to 20mm, and here we can see a different situation, strong pincushion distortion and even heavier vignette till f8. The sharpness is also worse till maybe f5.6. And at f5.6 the sharpness is great even in the corners. So the best image quality is at the wider end, and also you have to keep in mind the opposite distortion. And stop down the lens at 20mm for a less vignette and better sharpness. The flare performance is better than average, especially at 11mm, so guys, have a look. The minimum focusing distance is also very impressive. It's only 15 centimeters at 11mm, which makes you almost touch an object. I'm literally touching the viewfinder in this shot. At 20mm, the macro capabilities are not that impressive. Let's talk bokeh. It's really hard to get the autofocus background with this lens, and by the way, it has 7-bladed aperture. But if you do manage to get the autofocus background being very close to a subject, the bokeh looks pleasing, not busy, and pretty soft. And if you stop down, you can get some decent sun stars as well. The good news is that Tamron 11-20mm f2.8 almost doesn't suffer from chromatic aberrations, even wide open both at 11 and at 20mm, which is great. And the price. It's not cheap by any means, $830. That is why let's have a look at different options. So what do we have here? Pretty old but famous Sony 10-18 f4 with image stabilization. I own this lens for more than 4 years and enjoyed using it, and if your camera doesn't have a sensor stabilization and you don't absolutely need a faster aperture and have a couple of extra bucks, it's a great choice for $900. Also, there is a prime lens Samyang 12mm f2 autofocus, so if you do need an ultra-wide-angle lens and a bit faster aperture for less than half the price, it's a great option for $370, and if you're okay with a fixed focal length, the prime lens. And finally, if the budget is really tight, you can get a manual 12mm f2 lens from Brighton Star for only $190. If you're not afraid of focusing manually, and on such focal length it's easy to do, to be honest. So I'm working on the review of this lens right now, so stay tuned on the channel for this video. The conclusion: I really enjoyed using Tamron 11-20mm f2.8 lens. And it'll be especially handy for APS-C users and Sony a7 IV video shooters who shoot in 4K 60 on a daily basis. This lens comes highly recommended, but there is one major drawback: the price. Don't get me wrong, it's totally worth it, but it's still a huge price for an APS-C lens. So if you're okay with that, you wouldn't be disappointed. So guys, if you found this video helpful, please smash the like and subscribe buttons as I say in my videos and hit the notifications bell. Here are a couple of videos for you to watch next. My name is Oleg Nikitin, No Limits on channel, and I see you guys in the next video. Take care, bye.